All right, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, depending on where you are around the world. Good evening, possibly. My name is Kevin Miller. I serve as the CEO of LegalSifter, and welcome to an insider's guide to navigating AI in the CLM marketplace. I'm going to stop sharing here and introduce our guest and myself. First, myself. I serve as the CEO of LegalSifter. By way of background, I am a licensed attorney, but I've spent my career on the operating side of global private and publicly traded organizations. First in a variety of senior leadership roles in sourcing and procurement, as well as education, and multi-hundred-million-dollar organizations around the world. I also served as the chief operating officer of a privately held safety and technology business, where I was responsible for every function in a global enterprise of 1,000+ people. And then for the last 9 years, I've served as the CEO of LegalSifter. And I tell you that because I've spent a lot of time in and around contracts and serving all of the functions that have to mess around with contracts, all complaining about each other and the documents themselves. So very pleased to be here, and very pleased to be here with Lucy Bassli. Lucy is an attorney. She's the author of The Simple Guide to Legal Innovation, CLM, and also the book CLM Simplified: Efficient Contracting for Law Departments. She's the former Assistant General Counsel of Legal Operations and Contracting at Microsoft, where she was there for over a decade and redefined how legal work is done, including creating one of the first managed service engagements with her alma mater's law firm, Davis Wright Tremaine. Lucy has also served as Deputy General Counsel and first head of legal operations at Snowflake, and is currently the founder of InnoLaw. Lucy, welcome, and perhaps you could tell us a little bit about InnoLaw.
Thank you so much. Yes, all that combination of experiences in-house led me to this great, bright idea to start InnoLaw. About 6 years ago now, really set out from being in-house, from the doer, to being a consultant and an advisor and working with corporate law departments of all shapes and sizes on how they can make their commercial contracting more efficient, more modern. It's not just about technology. We'll get into all of that soon. But really being able to just share the bruises, the lessons learned, and the things that I've been able to discover by living it and breathing it firsthand, working with law firms, helping them, deliver more creatively to in-house teams, really everything. That's kind of why I think that's part of that introduction with the managed service. So that's what we do. We're a small niche consultancy. We work with a handful of clients at a time. We go in deep. It's a white glove service. We work really closely in getting them ready for optimizing with technology, for automation, and really just doing contracting better. That's what we do.
Well, thanks for that, Lucy. Our format today is we're going to spend about 45 minutes. I'm going to interview Lucy. We have a series of topics that we'd like to cover, and we'll talk back and forth amongst each other. But our goal is to give all of you 5 or 6 major bullets to think about as you're approaching the challenge that is contract operations. Your questions are welcome throughout this webinar. Please put them in the chat as we go, and we'll try to pause and pick them up as we go. We'll also save time at the end of the discussion for open questions. We appreciate your presence, and we are recording this webinar, and we will be making it available broadly. Well, Lucy, let's start at the beginning. You're an author, you're a speaker, you're a commercial lawyer, and frankly known as an agent of change in the marketplace for the last couple of decades. Where did this love of contracts originate?
That's an interesting question. I used to always tell my team back at Microsoft, I'm like, contracting's sexy. Why doesn't anybody get it? Really what happened was, you do enough contracts and you realize, okay, I can foresee where this is heading. And I think that was the first aha light bulb. There's only so many limits of liability provisions you can negotiate and still be surprised and enlightened and feel, you know, that, wow, I learned something new. And I think it very quickly became apparent to me that contracting is an operation. Doing contracts over and over again, you learn patterns and you learn themes and you can start doing some predicting. And so really, I grew a love for contracting, not contracts, which is, I think, a core probably difference between some of the attorneys or most commercial lawyers who really live in the four corners of the contract. I like what's inside the four corners and the words, and that's fun. And we love the commas and we love negotiating those words. But I like to step back and say, okay, well, now that I've done that 10 times, what's the 11th time going to look like? So it was really, you know, it was really that curiosity that I think formed the love. And it didn't hurt that my first key business partner, the head of procurement at Microsoft, said, "I'm glad you're here." It's death by paralegal over there, I think was the quote, over there being legal. "I hope you're here to fix that." I was like, yeah, we'll get to that in a second. So that helped spark my love, the how of contracting.
Yeah, say more about that. So you said, you know, you recognized early on that contracts were really an operation, and LegalSifter is very fond of saying it's a contract operations company, but tell me more about when you realized that.
Yeah, so I think, and that's why we get along so splendidly. Obviously, in my role, it's very important that we stay agnostic on solutions and solution providers and technology. That is entirely, you know, our job. I think what I get excited about is when I hear a solution provider talk in words that are reflective of the reality, whether in-house teams know it yet or not, and our job is to educate them. So I love this topic, this webinar. Before we get to AI, which is the hot topic, but really the bigger theme here is that contracts on their own don't exist without the entire combination of the people and the processes and the technologies and the rules within which they operate at very complex enterprises, big or small, regardless of the industry, regardless of the geography. The contract itself, it has a life. It starts somewhere, it goes somewhere next. People do things to it, they touch it, they tweak it, they move it, they push it into another thing. Then they need to find it. And really all of that's the operation. It is that movement, that dance of the people, the process, the tools, the artifacts, the technology all together. That's what makes it an operation, and it's ongoing. It is continuous. It doesn't stop. Unlike a project, starts and stops. This is a program, and you can use the word program and operation sometimes interchangeably. I mean, I think some of my ops professionals might cringe a little bit, but I think for the attorneys, good old practicing lawyers who hopefully are here and joining us on the webinar, they really need to start embracing that what they're doing is running an operation when they're the commercial lead, right, or the commercial lawyer. No different than every negotiation being a project. So stepping back and out of our legalese frame of mind and saying, hey, I'm running a little bit of a business here. In-house counsel, I am doing a lot of contracts. Each contract's a project. Starts and it ends with that signature and hopefully storage. But that's it. That's kind of done for the lawyer for the most part. But the next one and the next one and the next one together, all that's the program. That's the operation.
Yeah, we find that to be true. We find much of contract pain is felt in many organizations by the folks outside of a legal department, if a legal department in fact exists at the organization. And while the lawyers and legal department have some pain around contracts, it's the rest of the business that feels it even more acutely. And I think let's say more about contract operations. You know, how is contract operations different than, say, legal operations, or how is it akin to, say, sales operations or manufacturing operations or engineering operations? We hear these functions in other parts of the organization. We don't tend to see or hear about contract operations. How do you think about that?
Yeah, you know, that's a great question. I think what we're seeing a lot of right now is that contracting is becoming a subset or an insertion into legal ops generally. And those of you who've done any research around the legal operations, you know, evolution over the last probably 8 to 10 years, trying to formalize what it means. It is a broad combination of skills and functions and capabilities and all those good words. But you can't really just throw contracts in there. You really can't. And it's done. It's on people's graphs and charts and all that. I don't subscribe to that at all. The difference why legal ops doesn't include contracting, or really what happens is legal ops starts including CLM, which contract lifecycle management, it has become equated with tech. And because it is a piece of tech, somebody in legal ops like, don't worry, I'll handle this, because newsflash, lawyers aren't great at buying technology, nor should they be. It's not what we're trained for. But contracting operations, why it's not a part of legal operations to me, or why it can't just be added into it, it has to have its own, focused resourcing, is that it is a perfect, true intersection of legal and operations. That intersection, you can't do contracting without knowing what's inside of a contract and how the words all work together. And then you can't operationalize that without having an operations background and experience, or at least the curiosity or DNA to want to operationalize it. So that intersection is what makes contracting an operation. You can't just live inside the four corners. But it's not just pure legal ops, because legal ops is still heavily focused on tech, heavily focused on efficiencies in the law department's general work and procedures. It's infrastructural very oftentimes, right? It's like these core basic fundamentals that legal departments don't have when it comes to operations. A lot of that has to do with core technologies. CLM systems, they're not core technology to a law department. They are an enterprise problem, as you've alluded to. And how are they different from sales ops? Contracting, it's almost putting it on the side of sales ops, supply chain ops, finance ops, HR ops. All of these functions have ops, legal ops. But in that case, legal ops is almost how legal is contracting for its services. And contracting then becomes an operation across the enterprise, and every single function at the enterprise has to do some contracting. It gets interesting because legal is in the business of contracting. Procurement is in the business of contracting. Supply chain is in the business of contracting. So it is, a lot of it is kind of theory and philosophical. It can get a little exhausting, but I think the core point is that you got to know the intersection, what's inside the four corners, and then how those four corners float around a complex company.
We had a client 2 weeks ago say the following, and we've been using it liberally over the last 2 weeks because we just think it's really accurate. Contract operations exists in the ether, or the white space in between all of the other functions. And we've been fond of saying that contract operations is consistently going to be underled and underfunded because it operates across all these different functions. And depending on the organization, it may exist in legal, it may not exist in legal. And recognizing that reality, that it sits beneath all of the functions in the enterprise, is a helpful perspective, I think, for anyone who's looking into the tech side of contract operations, the expertise side of contract operations, or just who the heck is going to do this work, regardless of how much AI or expertise I might have on hand. So
it's like a connective tip, right, Kevin?
That's
like
right.
It's almost like it's contracting. The way we've seen it also described is that, yes, it lives in the ether. I think that's a great quote. And to us, it's a necessary evil of all the business that needs to be conducted. And all that business is conducted in all these different systems and and tools and departments. But that necessary evil of the contract, it has to happen. It needs to be done, and it is often treated that way, as this annoyance. But really, it's a thick. It needs some attention.
Now, there are a lot of organizations, including LegalSifter. We started as an AI company. I've personally been around AI since 2006. Our business is out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Carnegie Mellon, and because of that, we've been at the heart of this AI revolution since the beginning. And it can be easy to lose ourselves in these exciting developments. And we'll certainly talk about that a little bit in this webinar. But you are fond of saying something that I really like, which is, foundation before automation. Tell us a little bit about what you mean by that.
So, it's nothing new to say people and process before tools, right? We say that all the time. It's core PM speak. Don't throw technology. It's something that you haven't figured out how it works without the technology. Bill Gates is quoted over and over with automating a bad process is just going to make a bad process move maybe faster. It's a good quote. It's smarter than what I just remembered. But it's really this concept of throwing technology. It's something that you haven't really optimized and dissected. It just won't help. It actually will make things worse. So what we're seeing now, there's an explosion around CLM tech in general. And I will say this with all due respect to all my friends and colleagues across the CLM tech universe. There has been a little bit of a tail wagging a dog. What's happened is contracting's existed for decades. It's gotten more complex, certainly. It's gotten more voluminous, certainly, just as businesses evolved and globalization and all the changes in the regulatory space with data privacy and security. All those things together have just made contracting a little bit more front of mind for a lot of companies, regardless of even their industries. At the same time, there was a little bit of an awakening somewhere in the legal tech community that's like, hey, we can invest a little money in this thing called CLM. And it just exploded over the last few years. Very similar to what many of us who've been around for more minutes than we care to say is happened in e-discovery, electronic discovery. Somehow it went from discovery to electronic discovery. Well, yeah, email, document storage online, all that forced the change. What's happening now is contracting hasn't been touched. Contracting is very much still the same, and it actually is still the same. We still like our Word document, and we like to send it back and forth in email. That is the core, vast majority of how contracting is done today and will continue to be done in, I think, the near term. So trying to throw technology on a very deeply embraced, loved, and comfortable way of doing legal work, especially if you're focusing on the law department work part of contracting, that's just a tall order. And so this combination of the excitability of tech, a lot of venture capital money being put into the CLM tech space, feeds a sales machine, marketing. It feeds the promise of things in order to sell this technology. There's been a lot of attempts to sell it like any other SaaS product. I hear that all the time from some of my CLM tech buddies. And when I do, I say, okay, we're done here. Let's move on to another topic, because CLM tech is not SaaS. It is not a plug and play downloadable cloud-based solution out of the box. I don't care what anybody else says. All of that is already happening. 2 to 3, it's not right around COVID time, like boom, explosion, CLM tech. Oh my God, we're all virtual, COVID. Oh God, lawyers, you need to figure out how to do contracts faster. All that happened. And then ChatGPT came around. You've been around AI for a while. I know it's existed for long enough. Not an expert in it, don't ever claim to be, but I know enough living and breathing in the tech world that it's been around. But suddenly, this new iteration of it has sparked something unnatural in the CLM world. So that's how I'm seeing it right now. There's a lot of talk.
So you said CLM is not a traditional SaaS sale, which we of course agree with at LegalSifter. Say more about that and bring me back to foundation before automation.
Yes, I knew there was a question here originally.
That's okay.
Okay, all right. We'll get back to foundation before automation.
But say more about what you meant, why it's not just SaaS, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So automating contracting, as we've talked about, automating the operation of contracting cannot be done with one piece of technology. I'll just say that. It cannot be done effectively. It cannot be done successfully. It is sold that way by many, let's call them end-to-end CLM technologies. It's sold as the way that contracting can be done across the company. It simply, in reality, isn't happening. I don't know how else to say it more clearly than with the clients we have, the clients we see, the studies that we do. It simply is not resulting the way that it is being explained that it should. And that's why there's a lot of dissatisfaction. They're switching between companies. And then there's, of course, a lot happening on the tech side of integrations and mergers and buyouts and selling off chunks and buying pieces, because that end-to-end vision of, hey, I'm gonna download this SaaS product, or I'm gonna access this thing online, and it will do my contracting, with me and for me. It's too complex. A SaaS should be a standalone thing. It should live and operate in that box, that thing that you've acquired. It's complex. I'm not saying it's necessarily easy, but it follows usually a particular flow of work. Contracting doesn't follow one flow of work. It looks different at every company because of the nuances and the subject matter expertise required in contracting that doesn't exist in sales ops or finance ops or even HR ops. Yes, there are experts and domain specialists all in those different professions and functions. But unlike a contract, itself has layers and layers and layers of complex subject matter necessity inside of it. It has tax, it has finance, it has HR inputs, it has IP inputs, it has privacy inputs itself. And so the way that contract flows has to be so nuanced for every company that to think that an out-of-box SaaS solution can simply plug and play, it's incomprehensible to me. And yet it's happening and it's being sold. So it's just not a standalone SaaS product, and it shouldn't be pitched that way, but it is.
So you produced, InnoLaw did a study in December of 2023 that said that 53% of companies are looking to change out their CLM software in the next 12 months. Talk about why you think that, where that stat came from, and maybe take me to, I know you talk a lot about process mapping, and connect the dots between your pound the table excitement for process mapping and that 53% stat from December, which is frankly terrible.
And I'll wrap it into foundation before automation.
Yes,
how about
yes.
that? I did not forget, because the foundation that you need in order to automate successfully is a understanding of your current process. You have to be able to know how contracting works today. You have to have a vision for how you want contracting to work tomorrow. That's the change from what it is today to what it is tomorrow. Most law departments, assuming they're the buyers of CLM tech, which right now it's being sold a lot to them, but there are other buyers, procurement, sales, biz dev. Most come at the tech to solve this problem, this pain of contracting, but they can't articulate how it works today. They actually literally can't articulate it. They're like, it's a mess, it's overwhelming, it takes too long, but they can't write out how it flows today because it flows in so many different ways. And when they try, they realize, wow, it's a bowl of spaghetti. So process mapping helps you lay that foundation. It helps you get ready. Another thing that we pound on the table, CLM readiness, is a thing that we kind of birthed a few years ago, just realizing buyers aren't ready. That's why this 53% number is so terrifying and ugly and scary and true. And it's, by the way, from a combination of sources. There's a bunch of studies that are done out there, and then we have our first hands-on from our client base that tells us, wow, half are simply not happy. Well, I will tell you, most of those half weren't actually ready. I'm not here to poo-poo technology. Let's not quote that. I'm not here to be negative or downer on technology. The technology is good at what it was intended and built for. It's not as good as what it's being sold as, but oftentimes the buyers simply are not ready. And so for us, CLM readiness is actually how we describe the service we do. And that's why we built a product, actually, our own product that has nothing to do with CLM tech or automation of contracting. It has to do with getting people ready. That's our little launch pad, which we'll share access to for anybody who wants to give it a try. We have a free version because what we're realizing is people just don't know how to be ready to go buy that CLM tech product, whether they think it's SaaS or not SaaS, or AI or not AI or whatever. They're just not ready.
Yeah, I think we really agree at LegalSifter. I think our best clients are in two groups. The first group is they've self-identified, or we've helped them identify as ready.
Mm-hmm.
Ready meaning they have a sense of their current state, and they have a sense of their future state. And they're able to communicate that not only to themselves, but to us, which allows us to say, okay, we can help you or not, or in this case, we can, and here's how we can help you with software and services and plug in and supplement your team or be your team. And that's a first group of clients that's really good for us and does well. The second group of clients is the client that is looking for us to just take it over for them and say, look, we're not in a position and don't really want to be excellent at this. We bend metal, we deliver services, we write code. We need to think about this like payroll operations or HR operations, and we've already found a partner who can deliver software and services and help us out. We need to think the same way with contract operations. LegalSifter, can you be that for us? Where we've struggled with clients is exactly what you just said. They're just not ready to receive what LegalSifter or anybody else is able to deliver to them. And a leading indicator of that is, can they articulate for themselves their current state? Can they articulate, even if it's wrong, some vision of the future? And do they have the executive sponsorship, a third leg of the stool, an executive sponsorship to drive the change to actually get there if that future state is going to stick? And then you enter the CLM noise, and lots of people are told to buy that software, and I've been in software for 25 years. There's great software out there, but we're fond of saying, well, that's like buying a stick shift car and you can't drive stick shift, or another analogy, buying Netflix, but you have to type in all the movies to watch the movies. People just aren't ready to receive this technology. And so like you said, you guys have built a readiness tool. Say a little bit more about that.
Sure, it's called Launchpad, and we'll share links and things for it. What it does is it really is right now a food for thought for many who are starting in this CLM journey or overwhelmed by it, or have even started looking at different solutions and realizing they just don't know what to do. We help them take a step back and say, wait, maybe you just don't need to jump to tech quite yet. Maybe you need to rethink. My favorite topic, actually, you need to rethink, what is the law department spending their time doing in contracting? Are they out there chasing signatures? Do you have attorneys, some of your highest cost resources, out there chasing signatures or looking for contracts and searching and hunting and pecking? That's not valuable use of their time. So we help them think through not just what tech do they need. We help them think through, hey, are we doing this the best possible way today without the tech? Is our contracting request coming at us from every possible direction? Every law department that calls us, wherever they are, whether they have tech or not, they still have people sending them texts with questions, Slack messages, Teams messages, emails, of course. They're attaching contracts. Can I sign this? They're attaching spreadsheets. Can I sign that? I mean, it's that crazy. And if you're in that state of craziness, you cannot buy a piece of tech widget and gadget. Now, I like what you're saying, Kevin, which is, you know what? I'm overwhelmed by all of this. I really need my lawyers to only function at the highest level of providing advice. I actually don't even want them to touch contracts unless they're over $1 million, $5 million. You decide, develop your policy for what you want your internal legal professionals to touch. Hand off everything else. Hand it off to a LegalSifter that could say, you know what? Don't worry, we'll figure out your magical combination of tech and people and good process flow and policy, meaning, thresholds. Hand that off. I mean, that is to me the ultimate definition of a good old managed service, which that's a boring old term from the 80s that I love. Not that I was even around in the 80s, really, just a wee baby. But the concept of handing over the full operation to somebody and saying, figure it out for us, that could be an amazing solution. But right now, people are in this FOMO feeling of, I had to buy a piece of tech. I gotta get not just CLM tech. I could get AI. And we have our analogies, right? We all have our little suitcases of analogies we walk around with. I always say, if you're gonna, two, I'm gonna use two. One, like you said about Netflix, I always say about Uber. Right now, I am bent on teaching my parents to use Uber, just in case of an emergency. I just want them to be able to use Uber. They're overwhelmed by the thought of using Uber right now. Uber's about as plug and play as it can get, but you know what? You better know if you need a Lux or a sedan or the size, what's this priority thing? By the way, where are you going? Do you have the address? Do you know where you are right now? What if it can't find you? I mean, there's all of those things. CLM Tech is just a huge example of that little tiny Uber example, of using the Uber app. So it's not plug and play from a tech perspective. And then where I think you were headed, Kevin, I want to throw it back to you. Let's talk about change management. change management. You know, when I was 16 and went to buy my first car, I didn't go by myself. And that's a lot of what we say we do. We're like, we're your trusted uncle or neighbor that's going to go help somebody find the right car. But we have clients who are out there saying they're shopping for an engine. I need to go buy the best engine. No, you need a car, but you don't even know what car you need. That's a big change if you're going from, you know, riding on the bus or sitting in somebody else's car to trying to buy your own and drive it. And you're out there telling me you want to pick the engine. I mean, I think change management here is 90% of the game.
Well, I think you're right. And I think, you know, we're 30 minutes into this webinar. We really haven't talked about AI very much yet. We will here in a little bit. And that's intentional, folks, if you haven't figured this out yet. I think for us, what we see is the AI in general gives us more options on how to solve your problems. But if you don't have a true north on which problem you're trying to solve, you're a hammer looking for a nail. And I think what we encourage folks, what I think Lucy does a great job of, what I think LegalSifter does a good job of, is we say to you, listen, where's your pain? Is it pre-signature, post-signature, both? Do you have the people? Do you have the arms and legs? Do you have AI-enabled software? Because you are going to need that, and there's tons of good software you can get out there, us and from many others. And do you actually have expertise? And expertise is pre-signature and post-signature, not just how do I negotiate that carve out on indemnity, but also how do I curate all of my agreements on an ongoing basis, make sure I don't miss any obligations, make sure I'm managing those contracts once they're executed. You got to have expertise, you have to have people, and you have to have AI software. And if you don't have all three things and you have to piece those together, lots of organizations are struggling. However, back to your change question, what we've also seen and what we believe is, let's say you do all those things really well. Let's say you have your current state sense of things. Let's say you have a future state vision. And let's say you're able to piece together either through a partnership like with LegalSifter or through any number of other suppliers, the expertise, the arms and legs, the people, and the AI software, those three keys to contract operation success. Let's say you have all that aligned, companies are still at times struggling to get to that future state vision, and that's because they forgot or didn't have the change management skills. You know, by definition, you're trying to take an organization from here to there, and oftentimes the difference is none of those other things. It's your ability to navigate the internal politics of your organization to get the humans to do things differently. And for that, LegalSifter and myself, I've been taught this for the last 20 years. I can't emphasize this enough. You don't have to think about how to do this. Go and look up John Kotter, Kotter. He's a world famous guy who teaches change management, and he has an 8-step process for driving change. Just go do that. And it starts with, you know, creating a sense of urgency and then aligning your executive sponsorship, and then aligning your team, and then envisioning your current and future state and building a plan, and 4 other steps. If you just do those things and then plug all those other pieces in, then you have a chance of beating that 53% dissatisfaction rating in the CLM space. But if you don't do that, none of this other stuff that we've been talking about for 30 minutes really matters.
No, you really can't succeed with bringing in AI, again, at the most micro level, but bringing in any kind of CLM related tech without the change. You have to know where you are today and where you want to get. You have to know all the people that are affected and impacted by all those changes. I mean, honestly, if I look right now at kind of across our client base, and as I said, we have about 5 to 10 clients at a time, so not a huge volume at a time. But over the course of 6 years, you know, we could do the math. We've had enough different shapes and sizes, by the way, from ginormous Fortune 50 companies, which is where I tend to have a lot of my network, to small law departments who reach out for help. I'm going to venture to say 95% of the problems that we are helping them deal through is the change management. They either didn't do it initially when they try to launch a system. Okay, what did they think? It's going to go live. It's been live for a year and nobody's using it. Nobody likes it. What was it designed to do? What did you think it was going to do? What did you articulate it was going to do? Did you set people's expectations? Did you talk to the right people internally? I mean, it's all those things. That's why change management is its own function. I mean, I've seen it done beautifully, and
That's right.
it's its own profession. And you know, in many ways, that's why big consultancies have entire hundreds of people, you know, armies that come out to help do this. But it doesn't have to be that complex. I think that's a message that you and I are probably aligned on.
That's
It
right.
actually isn't rocket science. It not because it doesn't require expertise and experience, you know, in it, but really it's also very logical. It's very practical. You cannot expect to bring in technology and it will drive change for you. That is the worst approach. And we see it. And we actually had a client one time say, launch the system and it'll, you know, it'll be there. People will. And by that point, it kind of got gray in my head and muted. And I was like, I don't even know what you just said because nothing else matters. We are not a good match if you think that getting a right CLM system then will solve all these problems. And we even have, you know what, a key, I would say we have some indicators that we've now tested over and over in conversations. And if people are looking at technology and they catch themselves saying things like, yeah, but then the system will pause and say, what is it? It does not just exist. Now you could say the expert will, absolutely, because that expert, that's what they need to come in and they just do. They figure whatever it needs to be done and they do it. That's why they're an expert. The system will only do what you tell it to do, what you teach it to do. Yes, it will learn because AI learns, and we all have the generative, and we could spend some time on the differences in AI and all that. And I think that would be helpful for our audience, but you should do that, not me. But if you're going into demoing systems and you've got your budget and you're ready to buy, and in your mind, the system will, ... You got to teach it all of that. You got to be ready for when you get that system, that you're going to teach it exactly what you want it to do and exactly how you want it to do it, and be there to correct it and be there to poke at it and be there to figure out why it didn't do what you told it to do. And I think, Kevin, what I love about what you guys have said really well with this combination of you got to have the tech, the people, and the experts. And I at first thought, well, aren't the people the experts? But they're not.
Right.
And what we see is too many buyers that are people really good at inside the four corners of the contract, probably. They're not the experts in the contracting operation, and they don't know how to it, right?
One of our team members is fond of saying, you know, and a lot of people on this phone are probably familiar with Salesforce. They're obviously much bigger than LegalSifter. It's akin to saying, you know, Salesforce, which also has a lot of AI, saying, oh, well, if you buy Salesforce, all your sales problems are solved. That no one on this call would say that. We've seen at times people have, as you just said, say that in contracting, and it's a mistake. And I think change management is not something we teach our law departments regularly. It's certainly not something they were educated on, but it is, as you said, it's something that can be learned. I can't emphasize this enough. John Kotter, Kotter, just do what he tells you to do, and you're going to be in pretty good shape. And I think if you follow that process, then some of the other things we've already talked about in the last 30 minutes naturally fold into that conversation. And then suddenly when you go out into the world to look at all the cool AI tools that LegalSifter and other companies are throwing at you, you have a place for that to fit inside of the problem and that you're solving, inside the contract operations function that you're either building on your own or you're partnering with somebody like LegalSifter to build. And it's that framework all inside of something called, you know, change management that makes that ultimately will lead to success. Which brings me to my next question or two more, and then we can open it up. One is you talk about, and if you can connect it to AI, great. What do you mean by smart risk taking?
Yeah. So for us, you know, our approach, we developed quite a I would say methodical approach to helping people get ready, helping law departments get ready. And it starts with, you know, yes, we have process mapping, we have all these things that you need to do, but it really starts with stepping back and saying, why do we do the contracts we do? Like, what, we're so overwhelmed and we hear it all the time, not enough time, too many contracts, you know, we need more people. And we have a client right now. I had this conversation yesterday with their GC. My team's going to say they need more lawyers, but I just can't. It's not going to happen. So they need to do something differently. what you realize very quickly is that they're not ready to assume any risk in contracting. Two types of risk. There's substantive and there's operation, I would say. Let's divide those in two. Lawyers aren't great at taking risk, period. We're not taught to take risk. We're taught to do the exact opposite. We all know that. So every time we negotiate a contract, we are mitigating the risk, all the risks presented inside the contract. And we also have control issues because we've been taught how to mitigate the risk. I want to do that contract because I know how to mitigate that risk. I'm not going to let go of doing that contract. That's an operational risk I've now taken. I've now said I have to see all the contracts. And we do have clients. That is the first question. It's always the first question we ask. How do you know which contracts to do? What do you spend your time on? How do the contracts come to you? So all those big little bucket of questions that are all leading to the same answer. Well, we do all the contracts that the business sends to us. Or worse, our business expects us to do all the contract. We review everything. That sentence we hear over and over. We review everything. That smart risk taking isn't existing. They've never heard of smart risk taking. So what do I mean by it? You're gonna have to take some risks. You're gonna have to let go of some of the contracts you do. You're gonna have to enable the business to do certain things when it comes to contracting workflow and operations, or inside the contract itself. You're gonna have to let go and educate somebody else. And you're gonna have to let go of the actual words inside the contract that you like best. You're not gonna get those every time. You're not. That's why you do the negotiation dance. So what is the best fallback? Let go of some of those. You have to take smart risks because this is another fact, unproven and unscientifically founded by me, that says it is impossible for a law department to do all the contracts that the business actually needs to run its business. They're either not seeing them because the business is going around them. They're either not keeping up with the ones they have, or they're spending their time on the contracts the business has decided are the right ones for legal to do. So legal's got to take control of its desk. It's got to take control of its contracting volume and operations, and it has to dictate what it will review because it is assessing the risks at a very high level to say, this is worth our time, this isn't. That's smart risk taking. It's a risk, and stuff can happen, and stuff can fall through the cracks.
It's absolutely true. I'm sitting here in the office of one of our marketing partners, and we're with the CEO today. And he told us a story just last week. This is a mid-markets company, and he said he uses outside counsel. He doesn't have any inside counsel. And he said the outside counsel, who he loves, sent him an NDA on other parties' paper that he had sent to them for review. And he came back and he counted with 43 red lines. And he sent it back and said, this is crazy. And they said, okay, I'm sorry. And they came back with 18. And I think that, and by the way, taking days to turn it around. And that's just, an example that so many people on this call have either lived or unintentionally done. I think in a world of AI, where organizations like LegalSifter and others are going to be coming to you and saying, well, look, I can get the AI to drive 90% of the experience here, or I can get AI to drive 50%, and I can get one of my lawyers to drive the remaining 40%, and you do 10%. Or wait for it, I can work with your procurement team to work with the AI and our lawyers, or just the AI to work with the counterparty without you involved at all. But your brain is represented in a box. These types of risks are appropriate in an environment where former COOs like me, who used to manage the legal department, I measured things really on how much did you hold up the business and how much did you cost me, not how beautifully you organized the language in the agreement. I'm not saying,
Kevin, you measured. Let's pause there.
Yeah, please go for
You
it.
measured, right? Most law departments aren't measuring, and they have no idea how many, what kind, how often, how long. Those are always the questions we say every law department has to be able to answer about contracting. That's what makes it an operation. You got to be able to answer how many, what kind, how often, how long. You have to, and they just can't. And that overwhelmed feeling and the promise of tech has formed a little bit of a perfect storm right now, and why 53% are unhappy. They're just not buying solutions for the problems they actually have. That's the mismatch.
Well, we're
So
we're quarter till. I still have one more topic to cover, and I want to summarize. But I want to make sure, and maybe if any of our moderators are out there, are there any questions on chat? If not, we'll move forward.
doesn't look like we've had any questions come in, but we want people to certainly chime in. And we're happy to also just get into some practical tips and tricks. So Kevin, maybe you have
Yeah.
another
So
topic to cover, and
I
then we
have one
can.
more I have one more topic, and then we'll summarize with practical tips and tricks, and try to give you a couple takeaways here. So we've talked a lot about process mapping and smart risk taking and change management. And oh, by the way, we happen to mention AI along the way. What kind of people or partners do our listeners need to think about hiring internally or externally in this environment if they're looking to crush contract operations? What are we looking for here?
So that's a fantastic, that's such a key question. Another one of our mantras is it's all about the people. Even the tech and the AI comes down to all about the people who build it, the people who train it, the people who test it. Without the right people, this contracting can't be successful. And I think too many lawyers think that doing the perfect words inside the four corners is what makes them the right, best lawyer. And that's not always the case because that's not operational. And we've just talked about contracting operations. If I think about the two categories of people that you've described, you need people and you need experts. Experts are people too. we really are, but you need people that are the doers. These are the ones that are checking contracts. They are the ones that are checking the outputs from the AI. They are feeding back information into the AI. More contract stuff, they're processing that sausage factory in many ways. They really are. I lovingly refer to sausage factory, by the way. I'm not demeaning it. It's important because it's core. The experts are the people who know how to talk to the AI and can teach the mass people to do it because the experts are probably a little bit more expensive. The experts should be treated like a SWAT team. Whoop, you bring them in when there's an issue and there's a problem, and then they can swoop out. Experts are needed in knowing how AI fits in, how tech fits in. Experts are needed in risk tolerance. The people shouldn't be deciding risk tolerance every time they do a contract. That's usually what happens. When you have 20 commercial lawyers inside of a law department doing contracts, sadly, they become more the people than the experts. They can't use their expertise because they're so busy processing contracts. And each time they do a contract, they're taking a new risk tolerance approach. They don't think of it as an approach. They don't think of it as a methodology, but they are mitigating risk on the fly every time. Yes, there are factors that change, and every contract is a little bit unique, not unique enough to not have a methodical approach to your risk. That's what a SME can do. That's what an expert can do. So you need expertise in contracts, the laws of contracting, limits of liability and IPs and indemnities and infringements. You need that. You need an expert that knows how to apply technology to automate how limits of liability are edited differently, how IP provision can be edited differently. You need those experts to be able to train the people who are going to be then doing it on an ongoing, continuous basis. You need some unicorns in some ways too. You need the legal expertise and the operational tendencies, I call them. I always say it's a mutated gene that I had. You clearly had it. That's why we do what we do today, and we aren't living inside the contracts anymore. We had the subject matter, the substance. We became experts in contracts, the words inside. But we had a mutated gene in our DNA that's like, there's got to be a better way. We need those people. And that's a unique area of expertise that I think is evolving over time. And right now we're seeing more and more CLM, experts out there. I'd poke at those a little bit, but
No, I
it's
agree.
growing.
I agree with you. I think expertise and then the actual capacity to do the work with people who are willing to do the work on a regular basis. That's a great way to talk about it. And I think, for example, at LegalSifter, we have our expert. We have Ken Adams as our chief content officer, and he's world renowned for contract language and contract drafting, and we are proud to have him as part of our team. Whether it's Ken or somebody else, you've got to have expertise pre-signature. You also have to have expertise post-signature. you have to have the people willing to do the work. But as you said, somebody's got to put all this together. And I think by calling it and thinking about it as contract operations, the folks on this phone don't have to invent these concepts. These concepts have long since, this is well-worn paths are out there for you in engineering, in sales, in manufacturing. All of these groups have struggled and set up functions to do what contract operations functions should be doing. And those folks are steeped in process. They're steeped in change. They're steeped in metrics. They're steeped in integrating cool technology. Just because it hasn't happened in contracts doesn't mean that you can't do it. Just operating with that mindset is a great first step.
Yeah, that's right.
So, all right, listen, so we have, I want to wrap this up with a summary, and then maybe you can give the group a couple of quick tips, and if I have one, I'll give one. So I'm just going to summarize what we tried to cover today. I think the first thing is contract operations, not just CLM. Operations with a big O, and it analogizes to sales ops, it analogizes to legal ops, it analogizes to engineering ops. It's a shadow function in most companies. It's underled and underfunded. So you either need to piece together the 3 keys to good contract operations: AI, software, expertise, and actually the people to do the work. You need to piece that together internally, or you better find a partner like LegalSifter who can bring all 3, or you better find 3 different partners that can bring all 3 to you and piece it together yourself. But it's contract operations, it's cross-functional, it's much bigger than the 4 corners of the contract. The second is, foundation before automation. Really love that phrase. Getting a handle on your policy or your approach to things like risk. We want to do things like smart risk taking. We want to understand who can delegate to what, who can sign off on what. This is particularly true given the explosive nature of AI and the incredible things it's going to do over the next 2 years. You're going to be faced with a lot of risk decisions around AI. What are we going to let the technology do? Where is the data going to go? Who owns it? Who's my partner? Is it going to work? Am I going to supplement it with the right people? But if you're going to stay out of that game altogether, the same way some people have stayed out of handing things off to procurement because you don't trust procurement or sales, you're going to struggle to keep up. And so smart risk taking, I think, is the second thing. Third is, finding these right people, both access to expertise and the arms and legs, different concepts, but the same, in addition to having the operating people. And I'm sure I forgot a couple of other major points here because we talked about a lot. If you were going to give our folks just a couple of things to walk away, and change management, that was the last thing. It's like none of this stuff works without change management. Everything else we just said, if you get anything from this webinar, go read John Kotter, Kotter, follow his 8-step process, and put all of your contract operations challenges within that context, and you will have a much higher propensity for having success than you probably do today, because these are skills that all can be learned by everybody on this call. So if you were going to give a couple of tips in the last 2 or 3 minutes, what would you say?
I will say that the best secret of success, I think, for applying technology to your contracting problems. So if you really are still, you're bent on, I need to automate, I need to buy tech, I've been given a budget, I need to buy some technology. Scope it in, focus in on your top pain point or your most narrow pain point and apply the technology there. That's great actually place to test AI, because we get a lot of clients who come to us saying, my GC said I need to go figure out what's going on with AI. They really want to, they want a legal department to do something with AI. They're just doing this, it's a FOMO-y type of thing. They just, that's a reality. As much as I try to coach them back from it and say, come on, really hold on, pause. Maybe there's other things you need to do, people, process, blah, blah. If they really want that, and title of this webinar, it is about AI navigating it. Scope in very tightly what you want to apply the AI to. Be ready to test it. Be ready to be patient with it. Treat it as a new, eager, smart intern fresh out of law school that you have to be patient with, and you have to coach, and you have to train, and you have to have the right people that know how to talk to it. You can't have one of these crusty old law firm partners train the new fresh kid out of law school. We know that never works well. Same way you can't have a very seasoned commercial lawyer who loves a 50-paragraph page IP provision, to train a piece of AI. So I would say scope, hone in, find a unique, specific, focused problem, and then apply the AI, test the AI, look for a solution that has human-supported AI, human-enabled AI, because you need that. If you don't have it in-house, you don't have the patience or the bandwidth to do it, go to a company like a LegalSifter saying, great, no problem. Here's a piece of tech, and you know what? We're going to give you the people that can test and check and work and validate, because it's a trust but verify. Everything about AI right now is trust but verify. Period. That's a fact. So if anybody's buying AI thinking it's going to work out of the box magically, that would not be wise. So scope. That's the only way to succeed, I think, with CLM related tech these days.
Excellent, Lucy. Listen, thank you so much. If people wanted to get in touch with you or InnoLaw, where would they go?
Easy. We've dropped, I think, a link to our Launchpad. That's our readiness assessment. It's a mini 5-minute free thing, and that gets you a bunch of content and material. Of course, connect with me on LinkedIn. That's always fun and easy. Look us up in a law group. Look at that. I can point to it in my office, my trusty office. But reach out any possible way. We're always ready to chat.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Anyone wants to get in touch with LegalSifter, you can find us at LegalSifter.com or myself at Kevin@LegalSifter.com. Happy to talk to you about contract operations and how we might be able to be supportive. Lucy, thank you so much for your expertise. I look forward to speaking with you again. To everyone else, have a great day.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, everybody.